"You have obstructed justice," Judge Clarence Thomas roared from the bench, his eyes sharp as a knife. In the Columbus courtroom, every pair of eyes was fixed on Jasmine Crockett, as if wanting to tear her apart. The prosecutor stood up, his voice triumphant. "We demand her immediate arrest." Papers rustled. A few legal assistants sneered, as if she had already lost. Jasmine, the congresswoman with the thin leather brief, stood there, neither bowing her head nor trembling. Outside the door, reporters shouted, "Did you come to plead guilty?" But she didn't answer, just walked in, her gaze as steady as an inextinguishable flame. No one knew that the woman called the obstructionist was about to turn this courtroom into a battlefield of truth. In that brief was a secret powerful enough to shake all of Washington. The clatter of the court clerk's typewriter echoed in the silence. The dim yellow light shone on the wooden walls in the Columbus courtroom, as if to weigh down every soul present. Jasmine Crockett sat between her two lawyers, her hands clasped tightly, her eyes fixed on Judge Clarence Thomas. He, with his authoritative posture, seemed to have sealed her fate. No one in this room, from the legal assistants to the intern, suspected that the silent woman held evidence that could collapse the entire system. The ticking of the clock was like a heartbeat before a verdict. Jasmine hadn't come to beg for mercy. She had come to turn the tables. And the truth she carried would leave the entire court speechless. Early morning in Columbus, Ohio. The sky was overcast. Thick lead-gray clouds drifting slowly like a layer of dust covering the day about to break open. The cold, damp air seeped into the skin, making every breath heavy. The few remaining leaves on the branches shivered in the early winter wind, rustling like the whispers of a city holding a secret. The federal courthouse appeared like an ancient fortress of white stone. Soaring pillars casting shadows against the gray sky created a majestic, immovable presence, as if this place was not meant for emotions. Inside, the marble-tiled hallway echoed with hurried footsteps. Each sound seemed to stretch and twist in the space, then dissolved into tense silence. Legal assistants brushed past each other, dark suits, hands clutching thick files, furtive glances towards the large glass doors at the end of the corridor. And then she appeared. Jasmine Crockett, member of Congress, walked through the revolving door in the pale light. None of the bright red lipstick often seen on campaign posters. No elegant pearl necklace. No glittering pin. Just a well-fitted navy blue blazer on her small frame. Low-heeled shoes that made no sound. And a face without makeup, sharp. Completely unfazed. Her hands were empty, carrying only a thin, well-worn dark brown leather brief. As Jasmine advanced, reporters swarmed outside like hungry crows seeking information. Microphones were thrust high. Camera flashes popped like lightning in broad daylight. "Are you here to surrender, Congresswoman?" a reporter shouted. Jasmine didn't answer, didn't turn back. Only her eyes, sharp as a thin blade, cold and still, swept across the glass doors. All noise seemed to fade under her footsteps. Courtroom number 3, second floor. The air inside was thick as smoke. Dark wooden walls enclosed the space as if trying to squeeze every breath. The smell of old wood, paper, power, and fear mingled in a strange silence. Under the dim yellow light, the cold seemed to penetrate every layer of suit. Judge Clarence Thomas was already seated. Unusually, on the highest bench, he sat ramrod straight, shoulders still, his face expressionless as a stone statue. His gray hair was neatly cut, his black-rimmed glasses glinting whenever the light caught them. His gaze was not direct but full of unspoken meaning. "This is the domain of law, not your noisy legislative hall." Jasmine entered, still without a word. Two lawyers walked beside her, one young, serious-faced, the other older, contemplative, silent as two shadows. She sat down in the front row, placing the leather brief on the polished wooden table. Her hands were clasped, fingers lightly intertwined. Not a sound. A legal intern sitting at the back of the room stopped writing. His pen hung suspended over the paper. His eyes, young but attentive, were fixed on Jasmine as if witnessing something greater than a verdict. Across the aisle, the federal prosecutor stood up. He was tall, with salt and pepper hair. An expensive gray suit slightly loose at the shoulders, a small detail suggesting haste or concealment. His voice rang out, echoing in the enclosed space like a hammer striking stone. "Your Honor, The United States requests the court to declare contempt against Representative Jasmine Crockett for refusing to comply with a lawful subpoena from the House Ethics Committee. He emphasized each word, then glanced at Jasmine, a cold look, as if she had lost the moment she walked in. A thin, knife-like smile flickered across his lips. The clattering sound of the court clerk's typewriter continued steadily, recording every word, every breath, as if carving into history. A moment that seemed ordinary, but was in fact a bomb holding its breath before exploding. No one in the room, not even the judge, knew that the woman sitting silently there had not just come to face charges. In that thin leather brief was a secret powerful enough to shake the entire system: classified documents, buried testimonies, and a recording that could force Washington to rewrite the rules of the game. Precisely today, this gloomy day in Columbus, everything could change, not with shouts, but with the terrifying silence of truth. 2 weeks ago, in a room as sealed as a secret vault in the Rayburn office building, Washington, D.C., the air was heavy as lead, pressing down on every vein, every breath. Room 340, located at the end of a quiet corridor, was where the House Ethics Committee usually met in private. No cameras, no recording microphones, no mobile phones, only unforgiving stares and documents smelling of power. The door opened slowly. Jasmine Crockett stepped in, 3 minutes late, no apology, no hurry, as if time was hers to command. In her hand, she held a thin, neat stack of documents, fastened with a bright silver metal clip. She placed it on the table, as light as a warning. Her eyes scanned each person sitting opposite her, 5 representatives. 5 faces hardened by arrogance, calculation, or fear of what she knew. The chairman of the session was Ronald Beckman, the congressman from Idaho, sitting in the middle, shoulders tensed, his red tie a sharp cut below his white collar. He offered no greeting, no question, only saying, "We have begun." His voice was dry as old paper, devoid of greetings, devoid of politeness. Beckman was known for bending the law like molding clay, creating things that appeared legal but served private interests. Jasmine knew that well, and he also knew that she knew. She sat down, without a blink. On paper, they had summoned her for disruptive behavior during an internal meeting about the allocation of classified defense budgets. The truth was, Jasmine had done what few dared: publicly questioned a colleague about secretly diverting defense funds to shady private contracts. When she demanded a public vote, her microphone was cut. Not a single person objected. Now, they called her an obstruction to the process. Beckman looked at her, hands clasped in front of him, his voice steady, as if reading an indictment. "Today, we will decide whether your behavior constitutes a pattern of opposition to the committee." Jasmine interrupted. Her voice wasn't loud, but sharp enough to cut through the thick silence in the room. "This isn't about ethics. This is punishment for me asking the wrong question." A second, just for a second, Beckman froze, but Jasmine realized he didn't expect her to say it so directly. Representative Deirdre Lane, sitting to Beckman's right, lowered her head. Her fingers tapped lightly on the edge of a document, an unusual rhythm, as if hiding something deep inside. Jasmine looked directly at her. "You want to use the law to intimidate me? Then specify the law I violated. Don't bring up some vague clause that hasn't been touched in 20 years. A young assistant whispered something into Deirdre Lane's ear. The assistant's face briefly showed anxiety, her eyes seemingly saying, "She knows something." Beckman slammed the table, a sound like thunder, as if power was trying to reassert itself. "You are not allowed to speak out of turn. I'm not here to play games." Jasmine replied, her voice cold, her eyes shooting sparks. "If you want to threaten me, you should know I am not easily subdued." She stood up, gathering her documents with a single movement. That composure wasn't arrogance, it was the confidence of someone who knew they held the winning card. Beckman ground out each word through clenched teeth. "Failure to comply will have consequences. A subpoena will be issued." Jasmine walked towards the door. Before leaving, she stopped, without turning around, her voice low like a command. "Then send it quickly. Because what I am bringing will leave you no time to maneuver." The door slammed shut, echoing like a warning bell. That evening, the subpoena was delivered to her, only a few hours after the session. On it was Beckman's scrawled but rock-hard signature, a warning. a stain of ink trying to keep order from falling into the hands of truth. But Jasmine was ready. In the days that followed, she worked silently like an investigative journalist. She sifted through every email, every internal memo, every tangled message chain. Within them were names that had never been spoken aloud: generals, arms corporations, reallocations, amounting to tens of millions of dollars. The two people by her side now were not political allies, but lawyers. Naomi Reese, a former federal prosecutor, who once forced a governor to resign. Sharp, ice cold. Gabriel Dunn, a legal analyst who worked at the Brookings Institution. His every word was a finely honed knife. They warned her, "Jasmine, power does not like being cornered." She simply replied, "Then I will pick up a brush. And this time, I will repaint the entire picture." The scars from the past, the times she was interrupted during hearings, the frowns from her white colleagues when she spoke up, the headlines calling her aggressive when she was simply asking for transparency, had never disappeared. But they had forged her into steel, leading her to the courtroom today. And as she sat there, silent before Judge Clarence Thomas's accusation, what kept her from speaking wasn't fear, but because she heard the voices of those who had been crushed by this system, those considered technical glitches in the machinery of power, and she had sworn she would not let them be forgotten. The Columbus courtroom was plunged into a heavy silence, as if the air had been sucked out. Jasmine Crockett stood up, her figure small but her eyes blazing like an inextinguishable fire. She looked directly at Judge Clarence Thomas, her voice calm yet sharp as a blade slicing through the fog of power. "Your Honor," she said, "before you hold me in contempt of court, permit me to expose the truth about why I have been brought here." Without waiting for a reaction, she opened the beige envelope on the table, took out a thin stack of documents, each page stamped with a bright red notary seal. The rustle of paper echoed, like the heartbeat of the entire courtroom. The prosecutor's face hardened, gripping the edge of the table as if afraid of being swept away. The court clerk stopped typing, eyes fixed on Jasmine, a legal intern in the corner. Pen in hand, forgot to take notes, mouth slightly agape. Jasmine held up the first page, her voice steady but full of weight. "This is a sworn affidavit from a former congressional assistant who worked under Congressman Ronald Beckman. They witnessed shady transactions, email exchanges, and secret directives aimed at concealing $19 million of defense budget, transferred to a shell company operated by Beckman's brother-in-law." Not a sound. Judge Thomas, whose face was usually impassive, leaned forward slightly, his fingers tapping lightly on his chair. For the first time, he seemed drawn into the story. She turned to the next page, her voice higher, like an arrow shot straight. "In October, I requested budget documents from the Appropriations Committee. I received copies that were almost entirely blacked out. I investigated myself, and discovered illegal expenditures. 3 days later, an assistant came to me and said directly, 'Stay silent, or you will be destroyed by law.' Another messaged, 'They will make sure you can never hold your head up.'" She paused, her gaze sweeping across the courtroom, as if wanting to engrave every word into everyone's mind. "The subpoena the prosecutor calls lawful. It is a tool to force me to sign a false report, to cover up corruption. I refused, not out of defiance, but because I would not sell out the truth." A soft cough echoed from the corner of the room, as if breaking a thin layer of ice. A legal assistant whispered to a colleague but quickly fell silent as Jasmine continued, "I have encrypted messages, internal memos, and a list of transactions. All of it matches this affidavit." She looked directly at Thomas. "If you had to choose between safety and justice, what would you choose?" "I choose to speak the truth, even knowing the system will punish me." The air in the courtroom seemed to solidify. The prosecutor opened his mouth, but no words came out. Jasmine placed the documents down, her eyes not leaving Thomas. But that was not the final strategic blow she was about to deliver. Jasmine Crockett stood firm, her gaze like an auger drilling into the prosecutor. "If the Ethics Committee is transparent, why did they refuse to make the budget data public? I have encrypted messages ordering the deletion of documents from Congressman Beckman's staff. I have emails requesting that I be framed as disruptive to silence me." The prosecutor jumped up, his voice trembling. "Objection. These are baseless accusations, not previously disclosed. But his usual confidence had vanished. Naomi, Jasmine's lawyer, stood up, her voice calm. "We are prepared to provide copies, metadata, and an independent audit, Your Honor. If the prosecutor believes the documents are fake, let him examine them immediately." Judge Clarence Thomas raised his hand, signaling for silence. His eyes narrowed, revealing uneasiness for the first time, as if he realized the tide of the game had turned. Jasmine continued, her voice sharp as steel. "I am not here to save myself. I am here to ask, who protects the people when power steals their money? Who stands up when $19 million disappear into the pockets of a congressman's relatives?" A legal intern in the corner sprang up, applauding, but was quickly pulled back down by a colleague. Chairs squeaked. The spectators began to whisper, some nodding in support. The air in the courtroom was electric, ready to explode. The prosecutor, his face red, stammered, "We have internal oversight procedures." Jasmine cut him off, her voice sharp as a knife. "Your procedures are scoring your own test papers. The people deserve to know the truth, not excuses." The entire room burst into laughter. But this time, the laughter was on her side. A legal assistant whispered, "She's right." Another nodded, eyes brightened. Even the court clerk, usually emotionless, slightly raised her head, as if drawn into the moment. Judge Thomas struck his gavel, the sound echoing, but his gaze was no longer cold. "The court will review this evidence," he said, his voice low but heavy. He looked at Jasmine, as if seeing her for the first time, not as the accused, but as the one who changed the game. The prosecutor sat down, his hands trembling as he flipped through the documents, as if searching for an escape. But there was no way out. Jasmine's words didn't just silence the prosecutor. They made the entire room realize they had been on the wrong side of justice. And the system of power was shaking before the truth. The door to the Columbus courtroom closed. But the earthquake had only just begun. A legal assistant, hands still trembling, texted a colleague in Baltimore, "Crockett just exposed Beckman in court. This is real." The news spread like wildfire. Just a few hours later, a local station in Dayton aired the recording of Jasmine's testimony. Without commentary, just the raw words, letting the truth speak for itself. By evening, national television channels, from CNN to MSNBC, called it the biggest political shock of the year, though still cautiously avoiding the word corruption. Online, the hashtags #CrockettSpeaks and #Justice now climbed to the top trending topics. With millions of views, a journalist in Phoenix tweeted, "If Crockett's documents are real, it's not just Beckman who will fall, the whole system will shake." In Washington, congressional offices' phones rang incessantly, like an alarm before a storm. The office of Representative Deirdre Lane, who remained silent during the ethics meeting, canceled 2 public events without explanation. Lane's chief of staff deleted their LinkedIn profile at midnight. A senior aide to Beckman, who had received the email instructing the deletion of documents, submitted their resignation, leaving only a short note, "Personal reasons." By the next morning, Sloan Merrick, a former committee analyst, publicly released her affidavit online. She wrote, "I witnessed the manipulation of defense budgets. Was asked to conceal documents from June to August. What Representative Crockett said is the truth." Merrick's words were like a copy of Jasmine's, causing the media world to explode. A public records request from an independent group of journalists revealed Beckman's brother-in-law received 3 contract payments, totaling $19 million, through a shell company in Delaware. When reporters called the company's number, there was only the beeping sound of a disconnected line. Senator Charles Fenwick, a 32-year ally of Beckman and a patron of defense contracts, announced his sudden retirement. With no press conference, no statement, his office remained locked all day. 3 senior aides from 2 other congressional offices also resigned. Like falling dominoes, the wave did not stop in Washington. A state representative in Arkansas, inspired by Jasmine's case, demanded an audit of the state budget, citing the need for transparency like Crockett. A city council in New Mexico proposed a law requiring the public disclosure of lobbying contracts, with one council member specifically stating, "We learned from Columbus." No one mentioned Jasmine's name on paper, but her mark was everywhere, from online forums to closed-door meetings. An internal memo from Beckman's office leaked, showing the instruction to not cooperate with document requests, accompanied by email exchanges with defense contractors. Each leak was a hammer blow against the wall of power. That day, the trial ended as usual, without a dramatic gavel or grand pronouncements. But the next day, thousands of emails flooded the Department of Justice offices. From students, workers, to lawyers, demanding transparency and justice. One person stood up, and the entire system began to shake before the wave of awakening. Jasmine Crockett stepped out of the Columbus courthouse, the pale sunlight falling on her face. A crowd of reporters surrounded her, microphones held high, shouts ringing out. "Do you have evidence against Congress? Will you testify before the Senate?" She didn't stop, didn't answer, just walked through the crowd with a calm gait. Her lawyers Naomi and Gabriel walked on either side, like protective wings. She got into the black SUV. The door closed, and for the first time that day, she exhaled, not in victory, not in celebration, but in the moment she knew she had done what was right. Inside the courthouse, Judge Clarence Thomas remained seated, turning over each page of the documents Jasmine had submitted. His gaze was pensive, no longer showing the coldness of the morning. He folded the file, placed it on the table, as if it weighed more than wood. The courtroom was now empty, but the echoes of what Jasmine had said still hung in the air, like smoke that hadn't dissipated. In Washington, congressional offices were in chaos. Phones rang incessantly, emails piled up, and names that were once untouchable now trembled before the light of truth. But Jasmine didn't follow the news, didn't check hashtags, didn't read comments. She returned to her apartment in D.C., closed the door, took off her shoes, and sat on the floor. Documents were scattered around like pieces of an unfinished puzzle. She wasn't seeking the spotlight, didn't need cameras or praise. She just wanted the truth to be heard. And it had resonated, from the courtroom to every street corner. Naomi and Gabriel sat opposite her, eating fast food from paper boxes. But no one spoke of victory. Gabriel had once said, "Justice doesn't knock. It just shows up and refuses to sit down." He was right. Jasmine didn't come to ask permission, didn't come to please. She came to speak the truth. And its echoes were still spreading. From Columbus across the nation. She stood up, walked to the window, and looked out at the capital city sinking into darkness. Lights flickered, like small flames signaling change. Jasmine knew the fight wasn't over. There would be new hearings, attacking articles, even threats. But she wasn't afraid. Truth, once released, could not be locked away. She put the leather brief in the corner of the room, closed the lid of the document box, and sat on the sofa. For the first time in many days, she allowed herself to rest, if only for a moment. Jasmine Crockett stood by the window of her apartment in Washington, the lights of the Capitol twinkling like small fires in the night. She didn't turn on the TV, didn't check social media, where her name was still at the forefront of every debate. She just stood there, her hand touching the glass pane, as if wanting to feel the pulse of a city in transition. Behind her, Naomi and Gabriel sat on the floor, their fast food containers long cold. "You changed the direction," Gabriel said, his voice low. Jasmine didn't reply, but the corner of her lips twitched slightly, not a smile of victory, but the serenity of someone who knows they did the right thing. In Columbus, Judge Clarence Thomas closed the final file, his eyes heavy. He said nothing, but the act itself was an admission. Jasmine's truth had opened a door that could not be closed. Outside, from congressional offices to small streets, her echo still resonated. A law student in Toledo decided to continue studying because of her. A congressman in Arkansas demanded an audit because of her. Truth, once released, needs no fanfare. It finds its own way. Jasmine Crockett didn't just expose corruption, she taught us that truth, no matter how small, has the power to change an entire system. She walked into the courtroom risking arrest. But instead of bowing her head, she chose to speak, not for fame, but for justice. The lesson from her is, courage doesn't need to be loud. It is perseverance. It is the unwavering gaze before power. It is the hand opening an envelope knowing the consequences. Jasmine's actions remind us that each person can light the flame of justice, even if only with a question, a document, or a moment of refusing to be silent. Truth doesn't need you to be powerful, it just needs you to be honest. When you stand up, like she did, you don't just change yourself. You inspire others, from students to congressmen. Bring this lesson into your life. Don't be afraid to ask. Don't be afraid to speak. And don't think you are too small to make a difference. Justice begins with you. Did this story resonate with you? Comment on a moment when you stood up for the truth, no matter how small. Subscribe to discover stories of courage. And share this video if you believe justice always finds the light. Don't miss the next part. We will delve into secrets yet to be revealed.